Hello there, Dan the Weatherman here. Hey, welcome to my weather show. This is the global edition. Going to look at things going on around the globe. Of course, we're talking more extremes. We're still literally reeling from the aftermath of the recent hurricane for parts of the US, Ian, in the sense of that working through. Another one here, this big swirl. This is Julia. Luckily, though, with this one tracking more westerly, it's heading towards Central America in the next 24 to 48 hours. But we're also getting into a really critical time for weather. Of course, every week we're seeing more and more extremes as the planet warms. This is showing what is the temperature. The orange and red shows you the anomalies of warmer than normal. Blue shows you colder. And we're going into autumn in the northern hemisphere. Look at all that warmer than normal stuff that is just still sitting there. Parts of Siberia, parts of Canada. And this is literally that rusty color. That's a big upper ridge, and we have, remember, the big heat domes over parts of North America, Europe this summer, and there's a lot of almost memory in the continents, and these areas are still there. And look at that surging through, still hot to western parts of North America. Greenland, that could be 20-25 degrees above normal, off the scale. And as I say, we are starting to warm up in many places, and you'd think it would cool down. See these surges of blue here? That's the cool air coming out from the Antarctic continent. But interestingly as well, our weather, of course, driven by the jet stream. La Nina is playing it, but La Nina also pushes the jet streams further north, further south towards the poles. That squeezes it up. That creates more energy. And these heat domes, you see these big ridges there, that more or less sits in place. Where you get that, you get warm. Where you get a dive, you get cold. Through the week, a couple of things to point out. A big dive to eastern parts of North America. Stormy there, cooler for them. Another one dives in with some energy right there into western parts of Europe. Check this bloke out here. Straight down. Starting to see cool weather as the Siberian high sets up. And then for the southern hemisphere, see these zones of red? That's lots of energy as the cold air meets the warmth, and in particular moisture. That sets off some more stormy weather, and one particular surge there that will churn towards parts of Australia with yet more significant rain for eastern areas that they don't need. La Nina, the blue area there, meaning high pressure there, low pressure there, pushing with the winds that way. And the Indian Ocean dipole, warmer than normal seas here, all that creates fuel for the clouds, creates more storminess, and those two sorts of things are really going to affect the weather. But as I say, going into autumn, you would think things would start cooling down, but there's still lots of warmth. Sea temperatures off the scale in the North Pacific, in the Arctic seas, in the East Atlantic. But the big drivers, of course, are what we call the polar vortexes, driven by darkness. Now, in the northern hemisphere, Mother Nature is just starting to crank this one up. You can see it way up in the higher atmosphere. That's the northern hemisphere, North America, Siberia, Europe there. So that's a blob of cold glowing because of darkness, the lengthening night. Whereas in the southern hemisphere, you've had all your darkness over Antarctica. Now, if we run these into motion, watch what happens. There was a surge of the wobbly polar vortex that brought the polar outbreak to New Zealand. That goes away. But look at this. As you get more lengthening day across parts of the southern hemisphere, this is starting to fade. Whereas for the northern hemisphere, opposite. You're getting longer nights, you're getting cold, you're getting the darkness, and it just starts to grow. And when that hits the surface, that's when we start to see more of the outbreak. So in the northern hemisphere, you're wondering, well, it's still warm. Give it a couple of weeks, the old polar vortex will start cranking in the cold, whereas in the southern hemisphere, that one is starting to fade. Now, we look at North America first off. Remember that tropical troublemaker? That's Julia, heading into Nicaragua in the next 24 to 48 hours. Big surge of cold. Remember the big bendy thing coming down? Cooler than normal for parts of the eastern Canada. That's down to the northeast US. Still very warm over the west because of the big upper ridge. By the end of the week, another system dives down. Follow that blue line. That's the rain-snow line. So starting to see hints of some snow on the US-Canadian border. Good area of rain there with probably some severe thunderstorms on the leading edge, heading towards the northeast US. But moisture, again, drier than normal over the western US. And you see, temperature-wise, it's a real seesaw this week over the US. Look at the oranges and the reds, 70s, 80s, even 90s. But put your eyes to places like the upper Midwest, somewhere like Minnesota perhaps, Minneapolis. Temperatures will go from 80s in the red, 20, 25 to 30, and then they'll start seeing some 30s at night. Look at the blue, plunging down. Real swings in the temperature, but it stays warm particularly over the desert southwest because of that big upper ridge. Now we head to Europe. Things are starting to change from the north and the west. We've had one batch of systems move in with the very active jet stream into the northwest parts of Britain, into parts of Norway. Been quiet over much of the central and eastern parts of the continent because of high pressure. A little bit stormy towards parts of Italy. That system just hangs out there like a kind of car stuck in the mud, spinning its wet weather. A new high settles into eastern areas. And yeah, look at this, whoa, barreling in the Atlantic. It's getting into the autumn westerlies for parts of the British Isles, more wind, more rain, and for parts of Norway. And then check out the rainfall for the week. Yeah, certainly the raincoat weather. Western parts of Scotland could see 50 to 100 millimetres of rain. Western parts of, for instance, Wales and Western England and Ireland. And look at that, parts of Norway in excess of 100 millimetres over the course of this week, where much of central and eastern parts of Europe should be otherwise dry. And you can see that blob of colour there. Yeah, that's a bit wet for parts of Italy. I mentioned Australia. A couple of things going on. Now, we've lost the polar outbreak for New Zealand. Well gone. Instead, it's just systems bringing the air from the Tasman. More typical. Some 20-degree readings after temperatures barely getting above freezing over the past week for eastern parts of New Zealand. Australia starts off dry after what was a wet weekend, but another system coming from the warmer than normal Indian Ocean, getting fuel, of course, from the Antarctic, and boom, barrels in another zone of rain. That will set up going to the later parts of the week. New Zealand, high and dry, much quieter week for kids on school holidays there with high pressure. But this could cause some problems. There's southeastern parts of Australia. And look at that. In particular, interior parts of Victoria and also parts of interior New South Wales, just southwest of Sydney, we're looking at another 50 to 100 millimetres of rain on what is very sodden ground. So that could unfortunately cause some more problems for the rivers. So that's the weather for now.